Welcome to Connecticut Yankee Sanity. Today we'll talk about Bernie Sanders. I'm frankly worried about him. He got so pissed off in last week's debate when aspects of his grand socialist vision were called into question that I feared they might have to take him away in an ambulance, either to the emergency room or the closest psychiatric facility, somewhere where they could stabilize him. He soldiers on, but the battle isn't going as swimmingly as it might. Even if freshman Congressman AOC condescends to give him her gold plated endorsement, and even if by some miracle he outperforms Joe Biden in the primaries, there's no way the DNC will field an avowed socialist as their presidential nominee. But come to think of it, maybe they will. So Mr. Sanders, who's still placing second in most polls, remains interesting. Thanks to his surprisingly strong performance in the 2016 primaries, in what was essentially a three-legged race before Mrs. Clinton finally got her act halfway together and stumbled forward on her own, the Democrats decided to tighten up the rules on who can be a candidate. They now require something akin to a blood oath. The candidate must be, quote, a bona fide Democrat whose record of public service, accomplishments, published writings, and or public statements affirmatively demonstrates that the candidate is faithful to the interests, welfare, and success of the Democratic Party of the United States, who subscribes to the substance, intent, and principles of the Charter and the bylaws of the Democratic Party of the United States, and who will participate in the convention in good faith. Whew, all that in one long, grandiose sentence. Mr. Sanders signed, and why not? There's actually little to differentiate him as a socialist from the, quote, substance, intent, and principles, unquote, of the Democratic Party in its present form. Hardly a month had gone by, though, before Mr. Sanders stepped in you-know-what and filed as an independent for the 2024 Senate race. So, which is he? We expect ambiguity from politicians, I know, but not everybody in the DNC was best pleased with him over that. The word socialism is paired with various adjectives to make it seem more palatable. Mr. Sanders sees himself, he says, as a Nordic socialist. But that's apparently too Nordic for the masses to understand, so he applied a bit of mascara and some lipstick to the pale northern image and came up with democratic socialism as his prettified tagline. But, he hastens to clarify, his is not the kind of socialism in which the government owns the local pizza parlor. What kind of socialism is it then? Neither Marx nor Engels used the term, but Lenin did. He regarded socialism as the introductory phase of communism. Not exactly communism light, but perhaps undergraduate communism. Coursework, so to speak, along the way to the commie PhD. We're therefore justified in being suspicious that socialism, as Mr. Sanders conceives it, is actually a stepping stone to communism here. Venezuela, over which he used to swoon, provides a convenient reference point. In a generation, they went from capitalism and relative prosperity to universal poverty under a communist dictator. But that's a detail. Comrade Sanders is probably sincere when he says he doesn't want the government to own the means of production, at least not yet. But he's about to turn 78 and unlikely to be the guy calling the shots when, as he intends, we follow Venezuela's example. People like Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar will be in that role, and I doubt their socialism will be the Nordic variety. Socialism works in Scandinavia because their societies are homogeneous, not racially, culturally, and ethnically chaotic. Whoops, I meant diverse, like ours. They don't have a lot of people who look like Alexandra, Elon, and Rashida running around Stockholm and running their mouths. The flood of Muslim refugees is admittedly diluting that Scandinavian homogeneity, but there's still a broad consensus favoring their strain of socialism. Unlike what the Democrats propose for us, its benefits are available to everyone, not just preferred victim groups. They therefore avoid the phenomenon, which breeds resentment here, of more people in the wagon with fewer pulling. Government regulation of industry in Scandinavia, not ownership, also tends to confine itself to broad guidelines, with the details of implementation being left to the private sector. A multi-volume encyclopedia of OSHA rules and regulations that employers have to take a university course to master, or a 2,000-page Affordable Care Act that provides benefits to some while others pay, would, I suspect, leave the average Swedish politician scratching his head. Simply stated, the Scandinavians have a freer, more open market and society, less regulation, and less cultural dissonance than we do. Mr. Sanders isn't a Nordic socialist at all, but a limousine liberal with big ideas for transferring wealth from those who've created it to others who, as he sees it, are more deserving. He grew up relatively poor, and that probably explains his envy of the rich and his desire to avenge himself on them with confiscatory taxes. So far, so good. But he himself is wealthy. He has never suffered any real deprivation. He has an apartment in Washington and 2 houses in Vermont. His net worth is estimated at $2.5 million. His flippant explanation for his fat income is that he earns it writing best-selling books. Write one yourself if you don't like it, he says. But why is Mr. Sanders keeping this money and those residences? Why isn't he setting an example by divesting himself of them and living as an ascetic, like Ralph Nader, whose fashion sense he at least shares? Because he's another opportunist with his head full of ideas on how to make socialist beggars out of us, while availing himself of the material comforts and privileges that power grants prominent politicians. If there's some good news to be extracted from the spectacle of yet another go by him at the presidency, it's that he's a major pain in the butt for the Democrats. Nancy Pelosi and the DNC have their hands full as it is, coping with the socialist brats in the squad, without Mr. Sanders pandering to and strengthening the far left even more. If he attracts just half the following he did in 2016, he'll make Uncle Joe's mission even more likely to fail than it already is. Sanders had no trouble, you'll recall, abandoning millions of his mushy-minded followers in the 2016 primaries, glibly telling them to right-click and choose the Clinton option. But an estimated 12% of them chose the Trump option, helping to assure his victory. I won't be voting for Mr. Sanders in 2020, but I'm very enthusiastic about his candidacy. The Trumpster will win re-election on his own merit. But if Mr. Sanders inspired even more people to vote for him, what the hell? We'll take the extra votes with a robust shout-out to the socialist dude from Vermont. Thank you for watching. Please hit subscribe to support the channel and share the link with your friends. We'll see you back here next time.